Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz. Very pleased to be welcoming some folks with us tonight from World Relief. This is an organization that brings in refugees from other countries, and during the next almost 60 minutes, we'll be finding out what exactly they do, where the countries are that folks are coming from, and everything that they do to help them once they get here. So very pleased to welcome them all. So to my right is Gail Cornelius. She is the regional director for World Relief. And next to her is New Hughes. And she is the site director for the Fox Valley. They have different locations, and we'll talk about that later. So she is the site director for the Fox Valley location. And then, last but not least, on the end is the only male at the table. We have Phil Stoffel. He is the director of Immigration Legal Services. You can give legal advice, but it depends, right?
It depends.
All right, welcome, all three of you. I appreciate very much your being here. This is a show I've wanted to do for a little bit here, and I'm glad that we were able to do it right now because so much is changing. New executive orders every other day coming out of Washington. I would have to think that your people that you're bringing in as refugees are scared to death in many cases, and so we want to explain what you guys do, the very basic and all the way to the end, and help alleviate people's concerns about what you're doing as well. So why don't we start with you, Gail, since you're the regional director. Tell us what World Relief is and what you do as an organization here in the Fox Valley.
Sure, great. Thanks for having us.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Good. So World Relief is a global Christian humanitarian organization. So we work around the world. We have sites internationally, and here in the U.S., a big portion of our work is working in refugee resettlement. Missionally, we work to meet the world's greatest crises in partnership with the church. So everything that we do, we really center on the church and that partnership. And with refugee resettlement, that's another partnership that we do with the U.S. government. So we work with the government to facilitate the refugee resettlement program, which means that as refugees are approved to travel and come resettle here in the U.S., we are one of 10 resettlement agencies that works across the country to place them into different communities, to help with the process of settling, of integration, of meeting some of the basic needs, and then really helping to get started on the right foot and connecting with things like schools and jobs and other benefits as well. And so in Wisconsin, we have two different sites here, one in the Fox Valley in Appleton and Oshkosh, and then a site in the Chippewa Valley, mostly in Eau Claire is where we're working over there.
Okay, all right. And I guess, probably before we get too much further, we want to mention this special day coming up, and we'll talk about it again later. World Refugee Day is coming up on June 20th, and there's going to be celebrations in Appleton and also at somewhere in Eau Claire.
That's right.
The one in Appleton will be at a place called the Castle. I've heard of that, but I'm not sure what that is. So we can talk about that as well. But so what really is World Refugee Day? And then we can talk more about the specifics. I'm having trouble talking tonight. Go ahead.
Sure.
You talk for a while.
Do you want to talk a little bit about World
So
Refugee
World
Day?
Refugee Day is an international day to just recognize the struggles, but also the strength and resiliency of refugees all around the world. And it highlights their stories, their successes, and we have been celebrating that since the existence of our office in partnership with the cities that we serve in, and then also the communities and the refugee themselves that have come here to call this place home.
Okay, all right, very good. And so what kinds of things are you going to be doing on that day?
Yeah, so this year it's very special. We are working in partnership with the castle. No, I can't think of its full name.
The History Museum
at the castle.
Oh, what is it called?
The History Museum.
History Museum.
It was formerly
at the
the
castle.
Houdini,
Okay.
the Houdini Museum. I don't know.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
I know where that is then. All right, thanks.
Last year, we put on an Afghan exhibit, Afghan refugee exhibit with the museum, and it was really successful, and they've been a great partner with us and just really championing our work and telling stories. And so this year we will be celebrating on June 21st. That's a Saturday morning. The farmers market in downtown Appleton will be happening as well. We will kind of do an open house performance event on the lawn of the museum.
Okay.
And then that day is also the Make Music event in Appleton. So we will be centering around musical performances, highlighting the cultures of the different refugee populations
Oh, nice.
that we have.
So that's all going to be on the 21st, since that's a Saturday.
Yep.
Even though World Refugee Day is the 20th.
Yep.
Any sense of what you're going to be doing in Eau Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Eau Claire, a little bit differently, we are going to be focused on a multicultural, really church celebration worship night. So we'll be welcoming the different immigrant churches in the Eau Claire area, and then of course all of the different populations that we work with for a night of storytelling and song and worship together there.
So yours will be, that one will be on the 20th?
That's right, the
Okay,
evening of the
all
20th.
right. And before we end tonight, we'll have to try to drive home that point again. So you mentioned churches a couple different times. I know my church has been very active over the years in bringing in refugees. I did some marketing and communications work with a church in Neenah where they brought in a very large family. I can't remember how many kids were in this family, but it was a big family, and so we sponsored them. And so is there, do you work with specific churches, or are any churches, whether they're of a certain denomination or whether they're non-denominational, do you work with any of them, or how does that work?
Yeah, we're pretty open.
Okay.
So we are an evangelical organization. So of course we have an affinity with many of the evangelical churches in the area, but we work with churches from all denominations as well. And I'm glad you talked about your experience and what your church has done. I think people sometimes forget that refugee resettlement as a whole was really built out of church movements. That's where refugee resettlement started. Before the government had, this formal program that we operate in. It was churches that said, look, we want to be the response to these crises around the world, and so we will help to sponsor, families and folks from different countries to be able to come here, and the church will be their partner in resettling. And so that's really where World Relief was founded out of, as well as saying we are a movement of the church, and so bringing that together, I think, is a really important connection to why we do refugee resettlement, why we exist for that.
Well, and I just want to make one point about, you mentioned evangelical. I think sometimes that word conjures up really bad or inaccurate notions about what that word means. Yes, it can have some negative connotations to it. On the other hand, even like the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which is a huge Lutheran, diocese, if you will. So evangelical does not necessarily nor always mean something radical or something bad, So I don't know, do you want to add anything to that? Or I just wanted to make that point because I think it's important.
Sure, I'm happy to. And just like any religion, any background, there's a wide range, right, within the umbrella. But we are the humanitarian arm of the National Association of Evangelicals. So again, we work with all different churches, and what we're called to do is centered in biblical principles and welcoming the stranger and loving your neighbor. And so that is a belief that regardless of the church, I think all evangelicals hold for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so why don't we start from point A all the way through? What are the countries where we're bringing refugees in from that you guys work with?
Yep, absolutely. Do either one of you want to take that one?
Go for it.
There you go, Phil.
There are, we have many different countries that we help resettle. I would say in the Fox Cities area, Congolese from the Democratic Republic of Congo might be our top country of resettlement. We previously resettled individuals from Burma, from Iraq. We have Syrians. We had a large Afghan resettlement take place when Kabul fell in 2021. Anything
Yeah,
else?
those are the biggest populations. More recently, we've seen in Eau Claire, it's a little bit different, but also from Venezuela, Nicaragua, more Central South American countries as well. Predominantly in the more recent history, almost half of the refugees in the U.S. have come with Congolese background from those countries.
Almost half, you said?
And our Congolese resettlement actually started in January of 2014. So if you can imagine what it was like for someone from, Central Africa, the middle of Africa, getting off an airplane in Appleton, Wisconsin, and it was cold. So
Yeah, and I'm not familiar at all with what the climate is in some of these other countries. I mean, Iraq and places like that, yes, but not some of the other ones. So, I mean, are those countries typically warmer climates?
Yes.
So,
I mean, almost anywhere is warmer.
well, yeah,
But yes,
that is
generally
true.
speaking.
Okay, so yeah, it has to be culture shock for these folks then when they get off the plane.
In so many ways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just the weather. Just the weather alone. I remember a number of years ago, I had some cousins come from Arizona, and the reason they came was personal, because my father was diagnosed with inoperable cancer, and so the boys wanted to come and see their uncle one last time. Well, they got off the plane, and they're like, good God almighty, we are going back to Arizona. And of all times, that was the year, I think it was the day after they got here, that the frozen tundra, I think it was called frozen tundra, it hit. And I mean, so we're running around trying to find coats for these guys, But I'm sure, as glad as they were to see my father, they were never so happy as to get back on that plane and head back for the Grand Canyon State. So, yeah, and they were just here for a few days. And so we're talking people who are coming here presumably for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And so from the moment they get off the plane, then what happens? Take us through, all the way through, so people can really, because I don't understand it either. So
Sure.
walk us through the process.
Sure.
Whoever wants to, if you guys want to split that up or however you want to do it.
Maybe if you wouldn't mind if I could even start from before they get off the plane,
Sure.
how we even...
Yes, because that was a question on my list here, but yeah, let's
Sure.
go ahead. How do they, I'm sure they apply, there's an application process, but how do you vet who's coming over?
Sure.
Why don't we start there?
So first, I think it's important to understand that World Relief doesn't have a part in playing who is selected to be a refugee or who comes to resettle. That's really the job of the U.S. government, and they work in partnership with the UN Higher Commission for Refugees. And so it is an international process, and as refugees are fleeing their homes, they go through an extensive vetting process that first starts with the UN organization to do that on the international level. If they're approved for that first step, then they can be placed into the US vetting process, which is a very long process that involves all of our national security agencies, where every part of their life is vetted for any sort of risk. So that process can take anywhere from maybe a couple of years to, we recently resettled a case that had been waiting for 30 years.
Wow.
Yes, so
Holy cow.
It's a long wait, and once they are fully vetted and approved, if they are not booked for travel, so if their travel isn't arranged for them to actually come into the U.S., then they go through that process every 6 months until they are booked for travel and able to
They go through the same
security
vetting process just on the U.S. side, or does it go back to the UN?
This all takes place internationally, yes.
So it every 6 months then it goes back to the UN and then to the U.S.
So the U.S. So once they're in sort of the approval process for the U.S., it's our government that's doing that.
Okay, all right. So they don't have to revisit the UN part of it.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
All right.
So all of that takes place overseas, and then their travel is arranged. And once they are approved to come and they're ready to travel, then then the resettlement agencies, all 10 of us, meet and in our national offices and determine what would be the best site for this particular family. And so based on, a lot of times it's community connections, or a lot of folks are coming here with some family ties or people that have already been resettled. In those cases, then that's the communities that they would be selected or identified for. And that's the point that we actually come into the picture here then locally, is once we have been assigned a particular family, then we take over from there. And so I'll let you talk about that.
All right, can I just interrupt
Yes.
for a moment
Sure.
before we go on, because I don't want to forget this question. So why, this may be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why do people want to leave their countries? Is it because they're war-torn countries and they feel that their lives are in danger? Do they just want a better life for themselves? And
I
talk
can
to us.
jump into that for
Okay,
a second.
yeah.
Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Just for the listening audience out there, who a refugee is actually defined by international law.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'll share that.
Sure, go right ahead.
It says the 1951 Refugee Convention defines a refugee as a person who is owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, and is outside the country of their nationality, and is unable or unwilling to go back due to the fear that they have.
So just to challenge even the question and saying why would they want to leave their homes, in most cases, in almost all of the cases we see, they don't want to leave their homes. They have been forced, literally by definition of being a refugee, they've been forced to flee because of the danger to their lives.
Okay.
So most of the folks that we see, even locally, are coming from a background where they've experienced a lot of trauma. They've had to leave in a very quick instance, and often that waiting period that we talked about takes place in a refugee camp that is already far from their original home.
Okay.
So then they set up a secondary community for this waiting stage. And so it's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of waiting that refugee families experience. And so in terms of I truly think the desire would be that they would be able to safely return home. That's what most of them want. And so
Return back to their homeland at
yes,
some
and
point.
so instead, the next best option is really to set up in the community here. And so that's what we really try to do, is foster that community and that safe place for them where they haven't been able to experience in many years.
Well, thank you for clarifying. That was a poor choice of words on my part. Want to leave, and as soon as I said it, I thought, wait a minute, wait. But anyway, thank you for correcting that. I stand corrected, and I apologize. So they get here. That whole vetting process takes place over however many months or years it is. Sounds like 2 years is kind of the minimum. And but one went 30 years. Now that's interesting to me, because 30 years, that is a long time to wait. I mean, an incredible, we're talking 30 years. There are some people probably watching this or listening to this who haven't even been around 30 years.
Right.
During that 30-year period, in that one case, did they stay in the same safe refugee area that whole time, or did they kind of have to move from place to place, or?
Yeah.
I can't speak to this case specifically, but I grew up as a child who was born in a refugee camp and then came here as well.
Okay.
And in my adult life, I've worked overseas with refugee populations awaiting resettlement. And I think a lot of them, it depends on their situation, but there are families that do wait in the same camp for all those years. They go in as a single person, they meet their husband, they have children, their children grow up. And then they are, booked to go to a new country for their forever home. But every case is a little different, because not all refugees are actually in a camp. Many are, but some could be urban. So they could be in a city where there is a little bit more mobility, that they could probably move around for jobs and such. So it all really depends on the families.
Sure.
I think a lot of the ones we see, I would say, are probably in the same camps, unless there's like danger that comes there as well, and they can move to a neighboring one. Or
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned work. So what kinds of, and I do know the answer to this, I do know, but I'm going to ask it because I don't think a lot of people know. Some of the people that you're bringing over from these refugee camps and resettling here are highly skilled individuals, doctors, dentists, lawyers. And then there are some at the completely other end of the spectrum. But talk to us a little about, if you guys would please, about the types of knowledge base and skills that these folks have, because I think too many people out there think, geez, they're just bringing people into this country and they're taking our jobs, and they're on welfare programs and this, that, and the other. That is so far from the truth. So explain what these folks do.
Talk about what backgrounds and employment kinds of things.
Yeah, so that's great. A few things that came to mind right away is when the Syrian refugee crisis came, we saw a lot of individuals who were educated as doctors, as you said. They were highly skilled. They were in a society where people from the United States would go there for tourism and visit and different things like that. And then with Afghanistan, when Kabul fell in 2021, there was actually a lot of individuals who were dentists and came here. And it's really hard because a lot of these individuals, they have to leave their certifications behind and they can't continue that here. So I will say that when refugees come to America, they are saddened to leave their home country. They don't want to leave, but they're thankful to be here, and they want to work. And many of them start working right away. To say that a refugee would be taking someone's job, I don't think that's the case. I think these people are having to come in and start at the bottom and work their way up just like anyone else. So they're hard workers. And to add to that, they desire education. They want to learn. They want to grow. They want to be able to provide more for their families, just like we do and anyone else.
Sure. And I do know this because I know of different places in the Fox Valley where a lot of refugees are employed. And I've talked to these employers and have been told that these are some of the hardest working individuals you would ever want to meet. Even if they can't speak the language, they are, well, we'll talk about the language shortly, but I mean, despite a language barrier or what could be perceived as a language barrier, these folks are hardworking and they're there on the job no matter what. And I think that speaks a lot for kind of what you were saying, Phil, that they want to be here, they want to work, and they want to make a contribution to our society. Okay, so then we pick up after they get here.
So their flight is booked, and then we get the details of that flight. And what we would do then, the caseworkers would be assigned to a particular family, and then they would kind of be in charge of making sure that that airport arrival, that first touch point, is set. A lot of times if we are working with a Good Neighbor team or a GNT, so this is like a church or a community group that is trained and matched to come alongside a family in the first 6 months of their arrival, then the volunteers or the GNTs would get involved and most likely meet them at the airport as well.
Sure.
So it is very celebratory. Sometimes, like a lot of the Congolese arrivals, they have like 20 people from their community just at the airport welcoming them. And then they would be either put into an apartment or extended stay hotel, depending on housing situation. We, as we all know, housing is such a scarce.
That's another another 3 or 4 shows.
So and then they are signed up for all the basic services and necessities that are needed for their family to be established. So if they have children, then they would be enrolled in the school district that they're going to be living in. They would get their initial medical screening and set up at the primary care. They would get some services from the like the state, so like food stamps, food share, Medicaid, just to get them going. Employment services will be most likely in play right away, making sure that they could be self-sustained, at least self-sustained, in as soon as possible. And then in the resettlement program, our caseworkers work with them in a 90-day window, which we know is not a lot of time. That's 3 months. But the goal of that 90-day is to connect them to the vital services. And that's why the volunteers and the community coming alongside, walking with them further down is so important as well, because you can't learn a new way of life in 3 months.
No, not even in 3 years
not
in a
yeah,
lot of cases.
So the volunteer and the community plays such a big part of their integration, and families and individuals that do connect with the community, they do very well. They learn very quickly, like what Phil said, they want to drive, they're very highly motivated to just hit the ground running. And with the community, that's possible.
I can jump in about
Yeah.
legal services too.
Sure.
So one of the unique programs that we have is Immigration Legal Services. We've had it for about 10 years. And you brought up a large family that your church helped as a good, I don't know if it was a Good Neighbor team or something else.
It was.
One of my favorite things is I'll have large families in my office, and just last week I had a family of 10, and for whatever reason, the little kid's like coming behind my desk and around and searching for my stuff. This one kid grabbed a jar of my peanut butter, and he kept hiding it around the office. And when we're doing things that are as serious as legal services, that's really good to have that environment where people feel safe, where the kids are there. They might be coloring on the walls to a degree or bothering some of my colleagues, but it really makes things human,
Yeah.
Well, and those moments of levity,
Yeah.
no matter what they are, kind of help everybody sort of de-stress a little bit,
Yeah.
even
Right.
if it's just for a moment or
Yeah.
two.
So when we meet with someone, how this works is a lot of people might not know this, but a refugee is actually required by law to file for their green card or U.S. permanent residency after they've been in the United States for 1 year.
Okay.
So we focus primarily on the refugees that we resettle and helping them get these green cards. And this is a long process where, as you mentioned, vetting earlier, we are submitting a form to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. And it's another opportunity for the government to vet these people, and they go through their history and see where they're at. And people want their green cards. They want to be here. They
Sure.
want to be permanent residents. And something that I'd like to add to that is that one of the most common things that I hear from the community, even my friends and family, is we're fine if people are here as long as they do it the right way. We want people to go about things the right way. And I just wanted to give an example to the 30-year case about something called the Visa Bulletin. So this is public information, and there's one that just came out for May of 2025. And just to give an example, that if I was here lawfully as a U.S. citizen from India, okay, and if I wanted my sister to come here doing it the right way, they are now processing visas that were applied for on June 15th of 2006. That is an 18-year and 11-month wait doing it the right way.
And they're being processed now first.
Yeah. So they
Yeah,
are
wow.
they are being, and now they are being processed, and that's if everything goes smoothly.
Yeah.
It's about a 19-year wait. If I was from Mexico and I wanted to apply for my brother, they're processing visas that were applied for on March 15th of 2001, a 24-year and 2-month wait. And it's really hard because people want to do things the right way.
Sure.
It's just a broken system.
Yeah. Well, all right. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to write down broken system and how we can fix it.
Oh, that's above our pay grade.
Yeah. But suggestions possibly. So they're here. You've made those connections for them within the first 90 days, and then what happens after that 90 days?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so we have programs. So obviously it would be incredibly difficult for a family after 90 days to be on their own, have everything connected, be working. So we actually have extended programs through partnerships with both the federal and state governments that allow us to serve families for up to 5 years after their arrival.
When you say serve, you mean provide financial assistance to them?
Not
or
necessarily,
what exactly
or
does that
provide
mean?
different services. So it might be that, maybe they weren't placed in a job in their first 3 months because they were focused on their English language learning. So maybe they did full-time English language learning, and now they've been here 5 months and they're ready for their job placement. So then we would do their employment services at that time. It can also mean things like their immigration and legal services. It can mean sometimes they will have extended healthcare needs, and so serving that and working with healthcare navigation. Sometimes it is direct financial assistance, but that's always tied to specific types of programs like an accelerated employment program, for example. So we're definitely not doing handouts, as people would call them. They have to be engaging in specific programs that move them towards self-sufficiency.
Which I'll just say is a lot better than people who were born in this country and who just won't work. They just simply won't work. They have found ways to beat the system. I saw it when I was managing Section 8 housing. Generations. We had one situation where they were a third generation Section 8 housing recipient.
Wow.
And I'm sorry, there was no reason, because I'd have to requalify these people. I can't remember if it was every 6 months or every year. It's been a while.
Sure.
But you did have to pre-qualify these people and requalify them and requalify them. And anytime they had changes in their lives that were monetary type changes, they needed to report that to me as the landlord, even though I didn't own the property. And they just wouldn't work. I mean, they just wouldn't work. They just sat there and had their rent paid entirely for them. And, those are things that I find really annoying. And here we've got a lot of people who are coming here, and yes, one might think they're getting a handout in the beginning, but as you said, it's tied to something else that they're doing that moves them down that path to gainful employment, to housing that they can afford on their own, et cetera, et cetera.
And we've had several economic studies that have been done that show that any contributions that a refugee receives, any financial benefits that they receive, as part of this resettlement process, overwhelmingly is paid back hand over foot in their years since. And so of course they're paying taxes, they're working, they're doing all of the things, contributing to our communities and contributing to our schools and our livelihood. So they're paying back anything that they have ever gotten from the government.
And I thank you for making that point, because I just can't say enough good things about what you folks are doing. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, because, well, there's a lot of reasons, but and we'll get into those. But I wanted to shine a light on an organization that, yes, is helping to bring people here who are having to, for whatever reason, flee their native lands. And yet they aren't just getting a handout that they never have to pay back.
Right.
And there's a distinction between those folks and the ones who were born here and just sit here and take any handouts that they can get.
Just to add to Gail's point too, I don't think this was in your list, Gail, but if it was, sorry, I'm repeating it. But all refugees who come to the United States receive something called a refugee travel loan, and it's actually their first line of credit, and they have to pay it back. So that means that the flights that the refugees come to the United States on, the refugees pay for those. They might not be able to pay it all in full immediately, but it is literally their first line of credit in the United States, and they pay those back in full.
That's wonderful. I did not know that. Refugee travel loan.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so they're here. We've made those connections. What's the next step then after that first 90 days?
So that's really based on the needs of of the families, right? So some, especially folks that are coming because they already have family members here, they've built community, but really the next step is integrating into their community, whatever that looks like. So if it's, a Congolese family coming in that is integrating into the Congolese church that we have here locally, into the school system, into their neighborhoods. So it's rebuilding their lives is what happens. And that can take a while, but also, we have a pretty great community response, and I think people do feel welcomed here. They're able to do that, to rebuild their lives and to find those connections, and to find stable employment and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think people, like a lot of these families, they're searching for home, like a normalcy, like a place to belong. And, we look at that first couple of years with a family or an individual that might be struggling, and you're like, how are they going to make it? And I hear this a lot from the volunteers, but you wait a few more years and the success and how they grow to love this community, how they grow to have ownership in many ways, and that means contributing back to the community.
Sure.
There are so many of those stories. They may not stick around because they don't have to. Like they may want to go to Seattle where family is, and then find out that it's too expensive, and then come back.
And they come back.
Happens a lot.
Yeah.
Everything on the West Coast is expensive,
Yeah.
and the East Coast too, for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then I think it's just for them to find their way to become part of this community, and for the community to also learn and adapt, and then also embrace their cultures. Actually, we have a Afghan family that is going to be celebrating a grand opening of a catering business next week.
Oh, wow.
in
Where is
Appleton.
that at?
It'll be in Appleton.
In Appleton.
But they're going to be servicing from Oshkosh all the way to Green Bay. And right now they're using a community commercial kitchen. It'll be kind of like pop-ups and catering. But this is very exciting because, they, 3 years ago, came here. And right now it's like they are on a path to owning a business and sharing their culture, sharing their food with this community. And so you have a lot of those stories. And like I said, as a child who grew up in a refugee community, I see that with the Hmong population too. How, I talk to people now and they're like, oh, the Hmong people, you guys have done so well, but it took a long time.
Sure.
My mom never stepped foot in a school. She had no formal education, but now all her children graduated from college and have homes, have families, so we look at this as, and I always remind volunteers and my staff too, this is a generational growth. And all immigrants that come to the U.S., whether you came in the last few years or 100 years ago, it's generational, right? You hope to integrate.
Yeah, and so I think the point that you're making there is, that some of these notions that people have about systemic problems, that kind of speaks to that, to sort of quash that argument or that position that a lot of people have. So I thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And what a thing for your mom to be able to look at her children and say, I never set one single foot in a school in my entire life, and all my children have not just attended school but graduated college with degrees. How many children is that, I wonder?
There's 6 of us.
Kudos to you guys. I mean, that speaks volumes. I think about what you guys are doing. Okay, let's move on before I really break down here.
We do all the time, so don't worry.
So, you guys help then with language, because I know a lot of folks have language barriers, and you help them break down those language barriers. Talk about how you do that.
Sure. So we work in very close partnership with different English language providers. So the literacy connections here, as well as some of the technical colleges, have literacy programs, English language programs. So we ensure that all of the families that arrive are connected into whatever their best fit program is for English language, and start that learning process. Sometimes they will engage in informal learning, like through the GNTs, through the volunteer teams, or through different community partnerships, but then there is that formal learning process as well. I will say, many of our families that are resettled here, they will come speaking multiple languages. A lot of times it's not English, but they might speak 5 other languages. And so I know they learn English much faster than I would learn a second language, certainly. And so it is really amazing to see how quickly and how enthusiastic and committed they are to learning English.
Well, and to be able to speak 5 languages, I think that speaks volumes about their intelligence level, their ability and their capacity for learning. I mean, I don't speak 5 languages.
No.
I mean, I speak 1 and part of a couple others, and that's it. So, wow, that's something.
Yeah, once in a while we'll try to, my department will go into schools and speak to like 8th graders or freshmen in high school to tell them about what's going on. And one of the things that I try to encourage them is, I grew up in this area and I can just remember, man, school days could get so long and you just can't wait for summer and you want to get out and you kind of take the education for granted. But man, when these people come, that's what they asked for. They said, we need education. We want to be educated. We want to go to school. And I'll just add one more thing is I think it's pretty interesting that at least in the Fox Valley area, maybe not so much Chippewa Valley, but in the Fox Valley, a lot of those who come here can speak some conversational English. So that, my dad might say, well, I don't know if I can understand what they're saying, but especially for our staff, it's a nice that they can learn, but yet also that we can communicate with them up front too.
Yeah. And one thing I hear from volunteers who engage directly is like that language barrier sometimes it kind of it mobilizes the volunteer. Like they don't know what to do because they don't speak the language. And I just remind people, and I would say this to the community too, so much of it is in your body language. And like you don't need to have an extensive conversation to communicate with someone.
A smile does
just
wonders.
a smile. A welcome, a hello. And so communication is so much more than just language. Language is a huge part of it, but it's in how you present yourself as well.
Sure. You've mentioned a couple of times now new about volunteers. So I want to address that. These are volunteers with World Relief?
Yes.
Or okay, so how does one become a volunteer? And what is your, I would assume, other than money, volunteers is probably one of your greatest needs.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the World Relief volunteer process is quite intensive. Like I think people who come into it are quite surprised by what they have to go through.
But they're not waiting 18 to 30 years.
No.
But a little faster than
there's an interest form on our website where if you meet us at any events, you can inquire about volunteering. There is a online application that kind of works across the nation, but it's specific to our office as well, that would kind of put you in our radar then that you want to volunteer and we should take this journey with you. Once you're in there, then you also go through a training process. The way we see volunteer engagement is not so much that you want to give service to people, but that you want to build mutuality, that it is a transformational experience for you as well as the family. And so we do a lot of training that goes about strengths-based, about cultural competency, humility, and then specific tasks that may be of interest to you. So like we have either a move-in team for like housing, driving for apartments. There's different opportunities that are like the GNT, the group. And then friendship partners is like kind of more of a one-on-one pairing. Where
they're called friendship partners.
Friendship partners, yeah. Where that is like the basis to just have a friend for someone who may have come as an individual and don't really have a family connection, and you just kind of hang out with them and get to know them and trade culture and hang out. So those are the different types of volunteering. We do have like a background check that you have to pass because we are working with a more vulnerable population. There's like you have to pass a motor vehicle check because there is driving involved. So yeah, there's a few steps to get there, but I think once you're in, like what you get out of it is just
Sure.
yeah, amazing.
So what kind of folks are you looking for to be volunteers, other than folks who, want to give back and who are able to pass these background checks and motor vehicle checks? What kind of individual are you looking for?
Yeah, I think any kind. I think definitely depending on what you're wanting to do. So like if you want to be on a GNT, then you have to have like a group of people that are willing to commit together, to work together, to come alongside a family. And that is a little more hands-on. It's a little more intense because you're getting to know this family for 6 months. You're not required to work with them every single day or meet with them every single day.
Right.
But the needs may be higher because there's children. And so it'd be good for people that are on a GNT to have a bit of flexibility in their schedule as well, because some of those might require assisting our office with like appointments during the day or like groceries shopping and all that stuff. Friendship partners are for people that want to more like, they want the relationship, they want to be consistent with someone. But it could be more like on your time, because there's it's not so strict and like you have to spend this many hours together. And then also the other ones that are more one-off, like individual experiences, like the driving or the move-ins. You're not committed to a certain hour. It's just based on your availability for when we need those things. So anybody could really, as long as you pass the background check and all that stuff, anybody could really.
And you have to be 18, or do you have to be a little older?
I think the children, if you're younger than 18, you have to have like it's a additional step of like parental consent.
Okay.
And then there's different trainings for that to protect the minor as well as the families.
Okay.
And, yeah.
But otherwise, someone who's obviously 18 years of age or
Yes.
older.
And I would say the other things I would add is really that they have a sense of curiosity, right? They want to learn and see it as this mutual learning experience. And then some degree of empathy is helpful too, because you're going to be sharing in somebody's lived experience. And so being able to be that welcoming face, be that first smile that they might see, can really make a difference in somebody's life.
Or providing a warm winter coat if they're getting off of a plane in the middle of
Absolutely.
winter.
Absolutely.
Okay, so is there anything else that you want to talk about with regard to the process from the day they first apply to the time they get here and gain employment and they're all settled in? Is there anything else?
Maybe the last bit would just be about the option for citizenship.
Yeah, so a couple things with that. So once refugees have been in the United States for 4 years and 9 months, assuming that they have received their green cards, which is close because for a while the green cards were taking 3 years to process, so that was quite a wait. Once they're here for 4 years and 9 months, then we meet with individuals and we help them go through the citizenship process. Two of the requirements for citizenship are English and civics. So individuals have to be able to read, write, and speak English. And then they're given a 100-question civics test where they are randomly given 10 of those questions, and they have to get 6 of them right. Another thing that maybe individuals don't know about is that in order to get citizenship, an individual has to prove good moral character for the last 5 years. So that's really interesting.
How do you prove that?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest.
I mean, other than not having, a criminal record of any kind.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone I would think who's paying their bills, because that's part of moral character
Yeah,
as well.
I think you're right on. Like someone who's paying their taxes, who is staying out of legal trouble. I mean, there a lot of individuals, even probably some of us at this table probably have a traffic citation. So as long as it's very minor and doesn't involve drugs or alcohol, that's likely fine. But that is such a huge deal when someone can say that, maybe they're a refugee from Congo who was born in a refugee camp in Uganda, never even been to the Congo, lived there for 20 years, came to the U.S., got their first job, got their green card, and then almost 5 years later applied for citizenship and was able to take an oath ceremony.
Well, I think, and I want to thank you, Phil, for sharing that stuff, because I think very strongly, and this is the most political thing I'm probably going to say, I think we have a certain person who is sitting in the Oval Office right now, And I don't think that he could. Certainly, we know he has no moral character, so he fails on that point. He's a convicted felon, so he fails on that point. I don't know that he could pass the civics test.
Yeah,
I mean, you guys don't have to comment unless you want
I'll
to.
just say it's a tough test, and I think,
But I don't
mean,
think he could do it.
Yeah.
And yet, these folks have to. And that says everything right there. We're down to about 8 minutes. So I want to talk about the broken system. And, but before we get to that, talk to us a little bit about, obviously, changes, executive orders after executive orders coming out of Washington all the time. How does that affect you as an organization and the populations that you work with?
Sure, and we've only got 8 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's been a tough season for us, and I think one of the things I'd like to emphasize is that refugee resettlement historically has been a very bipartisan supported initiative, and that's our dream, right? So we are committed to working with any political party. That's really the best case scenario for us, is that we are able to respond as a country to this humanitarian need. So for us, it is a political issue, but it's not a partisan issue. So we work with political leaders across the spectrum who on both ends of the spectrum really see the value in refugee resettlement and understand the program. This environment now, we are currently operating, we are under an executive order where refugee resettlement is paused at the moment. So we have not, as a country, received refugees under the program since January 20, well, I think technically the 24th, but pretty much since day one of the current administration.
Did they say how long the pause is going to be?
Yes, so there is a period right now where the program is being evaluated by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State, and a recommendation was supposed to be issued on how we will continue with the refugee resettlement program within 90 days. So that 90 days fell on April 20th. We haven't seen any clear directives yet, but we're really hopeful that the administration will be able to see the value and continue to support the refugee resettlement program.
Let's just gaze into our non-existent crystal ball here. I know that none of us is telepathic at this table, but let's just try to foresee what might happen if our current administration says we're not just going to pause this, we're terminating it. I mean, is that a possibility, or is that,
so,
of course, we don't know, anything could happen.
Sure. So the Refugee Act of 1980, it's written into law, which is controlled by Congress. So we expect that at some point that the program would continue. Now, it is determined, the level of refugee resettlement is a direct determination by the presidential administration. So the number of folks that we would welcome and the priority countries that they would come from, that is a determination of the presidential administration. But the refugee resettlement program as a whole is something that's written into law.
Okay, so. Well, that's a good thing, of course. He doesn't have any respect for the law, so. But I'm glad to hear that it's, overseen by Congress, and that it's a bipartisan thing. So
it is.
I think that is, you guys have that on your side. Let's talk about this broken system. How badly is it broken? In what ways is it broken? And just give us maybe a laundry list of how we could fix it. And you've got 4 minutes.
4 minutes? Okay. Well, I just wanted to share this to make sure that listeners could just know and understand this, because I think that this touches on a lot of this, is that we've talked about Afghanistan a little bit and how Afghanistan fell in summer of 2021. That created a major crisis in individuals coming here. what I think is still important is that, people see the news, they see it for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, and then it goes away in their minds. But this situation is still very much active and ongoing. So what I want to say
In
is
Afghanistan.
here as well.
Here,
so
okay.
what I want to say to that is that probably half of those Afghans that fled, that came here, that were put on the planes, sometimes they are separated from their families and not given a choice because they worked for us. These were people who worked for the U.S. government in the U.S. military, and right now we've worked hard to assist them with the legal process and apply for their green cards. But a lot of it has been paused right now, and we're just, we're not sure what's going to happen. And I had a conversation with my brother-in-law the other day, and it's like, that's really tough, thinking that these individuals sacrificed a lot. Really hard for them to go back to Afghanistan at this point, and now they're kind of living in limbo.
Sure. And even if they went back to Afghanistan, there's nothing there for them anymore. So it would kind of be, you're starting over here, or if you go back, you're starting over there.
It's
if you
likely
even
that
can.
their lives are at risk if they go back.
Sure.
They were resettled here because, like Phil said, they worked alongside us and supported the U.S. And so they would be targets for the Taliban if they returned to Afghanistan.
All right. Well, how do we fix this?
Do you have those
Can
answers?
I add one more? Yeah. So this is.
Well, you got 2 minutes now.
Okay, sure. I can do this quick. So I know we can't fix everything, and people are going to fight about law and whatnot. But personally, me as a Christian, and what I can encourage my friends and family, and even those of us at this table, is that I encourage people to meet people of refugee and immigrant background. See them face to face and get to know them. Like I said, if whatever your faith is, we support people and we help people no matter what. And the nations are right here. We have the opportunity in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, to help individuals and to care for them. So go and meet someone. I think that breaks down barriers, and you can see the humanity in all of it.
Sure.
And I think that's what I would add in terms of fixing a broken system, is that one of the hardest things for us who live in this work and who love the populations that we serve is it feels like a lot of the humanity has been taken out of this. And so if people connected more to the humanitarian need, I think they might feel a little bit differently about this.
Well, and since this is a Christian type thing, Jesus himself met all kinds of people from all walks of life, which surprised a lot of people as to some of the people that he met. But he did it, and we should try and follow in his footsteps. We can never quite attain what he did, but as Christians, even if you're a non-Christian, you should still feel something, some compassion or something for fellow man. And I don't know. It's just a slap in the face of humanity to not do that. All right, wrapping up here very quickly. World Refugee Day coming up on June 20th. It's being celebrated in Eau Claire on June 20th. It will be celebrated in Appleton on the 21st, which is a Saturday, at the History Museum at the Castle, which used to be where the Houdini History Museum history was, or whatever. I want to find out where he disappeared and went to also. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate
We
it.
appreciate
And
it.
thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That will do it for this edition. Thank you to my guests once again, to my crew, and also to you. We will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.